Well, greetings, everyone. David Arundel here. I'm excited that you're joining us today so I can talk about some things that I've learned about with podcasting. I've been, along with students in my class, we've been podcasting for, what would it be? Something like about 15 years or so, just after podcasting actually started. And my original focus was just simply to create an academic support activity for the students and have them work with me and make it a lot of fun. Well, that's a story for a different podcast episode. What I wanted to share about was how is it that we can simplify the process of us being able to get our podcasts out for the largest number of listeners. And I'm going to be sharing with you some things that I've learned that you might find useful. One of the things that always reminds me about podcasting is it's not always about the audio quality, the equipment, and all the rest. It's, do you have something to say that other people want to listen to? And that if you have content that's meaningful, well, that's going to attract other people eventually. Somehow they're going to find you. I've been having people telling me that for years, and they're right. Well, and that's a different episode. One other one is I also not only do audio and video episodes, I also send out PDF documents. Now, I'm doing that for academic reasons. These could be materials related to helping my students prepare for exams. It could be materials that I'm sharing about scholarship that I study about, and I wanted to share what it is that I'm learning. And it's one of the, I think, undocumented things that most people don't know, that with many podcast systems, I use Libsyn myself, or I would say within the iTunes system, you can actually share PDF documents. That's another separate episode, but that's something else to take a look at. Simply in terms of statistics about downloads. I'm going to have a couple of PowerPoint slides. They're going to be pretty data dense, much too much material. So that's the reason why you're going to need to use the pause button if you want to be able to look at some of the fine print. The reason why I wanted to share this detailed slide here is I'm going to summarize it in about 2 or 3 sentences. The statistics tell us that people listen to podcasts a lot of different ways. On different devices. They do it on iOS devices, on Android. There's enormous diversity. And that's the reason why it's important that our podcasts be distributed widely on different platforms. And I'm going to give you some examples coming up here pretty quick. And that's the reason why I put in this whole slide here where it talks about all the different places and the percentages and stuff. It's not important unless that's some geeky stuff that you want, and I'd suggest hitting the pause button. It just reminds me, why is it important to make your podcast available in a variety of different places? Now, in terms of, well, what's kind of average for podcasts that are being downloaded? Well, frankly, it doesn't make a lot of difference to me. I just simply want to provide content for people who are interested. And for me, most of my professional career, it's been about providing things for the students who are enrolled in my class. One of the lessons that I learned is that we always ought to assume it's a one-on-one conversation that's going on. I have no idea how many people are going to eventually listen to this YouTube video, but I hope there's at least one, and maybe more, that end up doing so. And it impacts the way that I think about podcasting or think about YouTube episodes. So I don't really kind of get wrapped up into the numbers, because sometimes we hear about the big ones, like the ones that are on NPR. This American Life has been, for the longest period of time, has been the most widely distributed and downloaded audio podcast among everybody. I don't pretend that I'm ever going to reach anything that's like that. That's not what I think about. So I just thought it'd be interesting to throw in some statistics here. Once again, these last couple of slides have been leading up to this one. we need to have multiple distribution channels because you just don't know how people are going to consume podcasts. Sometimes people who are into Apple, and I'll have to admit, I'm an Apple fanboy. I have iPads and Apple TV and laptop, and this particular video is being mixed up on an iMac desktop. Well, there's a lot of machines and a lot of different operating systems that are out there. And I need to be respectful that people have lots of choices on how they want to do things. I just simply want to make my material available different ways. So these are kind of the big channels that are out there for how people consume podcasts. Here in the middle is you create one podcast episode, and by using some ingenuity and some podcasting distribution software systems, you're able to send it off to podcast apps for the iOS world and the Android world. We can use social media, and we'll talk about that coming up. You can distribute that through blogs and web pages. And also you can do so through podcast apps and directories. And the great thing is that for a whole bunch of this, you can make it so it's automatic. You don't have to somehow put in the effort. You make your one episode. You don't have to turn around every single time you make a new episode and spend the time it takes in order to put it on to 10, 15, 20, 30 different podcasting avenues. We can automate that. And that's something that I wanted to help simplify, because while I enjoy podcasting and I kind of see it as a hobby, I don't want this thing to take over control of my whole life. I do have a job. Now, here are some of the major music and podcast directories and their apps. And the one that lots of people talk about all the time is the iTunes Store. Or they end up talking about the Google Play Music Store. And if I remember right, this particular video is being made in March of 2020. I think they just split apart, and there's a separate Google place just for podcasts. So actually, I should have cleaned up on that. And then you see all the other ones: iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Deezer, Radio.com, Radio Public, and Libsyn. There's all kinds of different ways that podcasts are being distributed as well as being listened to. And somebody who's listening to a podcast on iHeartRadio would never know there was anything going on Spotify. Some people don't like Apple, so they're not going to go to the iTunes podcast store in order to find out what are some podcasts to listen to. They're going to go to TuneIn or Stitcher or one of the other ones. And this is just a short list. And as you can see, I have the websites that you would go to in order to register your podcast with them so that it could end up being played by them. And once again, this is part of the issue about making things automatic. By setting up these accounts, and this is a short video, I'll probably end up creating a couple more videos that show in more detail exactly what you would do in order to automate this process. But what I'm trying to get across is it is going to take some time to set up. And in order for you to get into many of these here, it's going to take some individual work. Now, I don't get any compensation from Libsyn, just to be really, really clear here. I just happen to use them as my distribution hub, if you kind of think of it as a wagon wheel with all of these other podcasts all around. And in the middle here is Libsyn. Libsyn allows me to be able to automate a system so that it will automatically send my podcast episodes to all of these different places and many, many more. So once again, no promotion, no remuneration to me. It just makes my life really easy. Now, it costs me Anywhere. I have 3 podcasts that I actually put out, and I would be able to do this distribution system for something like about $5 to $7 a month. That adds up over the course of a year, but for me, it makes my life incredibly easy. There's also a number of popular podcast apps that are out there. This is this automation thing I was talking about. If you have a podcast that is listed through iTunes, and I'm going to make a guess that if you have a podcast that is also registered through the Google Podcast Store, it automatically is going to appear in lots of other podcast catchers, actually, is what they would call them. And you don't have to do anything to register with Player FM, Castbox, Cast-O-Matic, and the rest. And that's what really is beautiful about the system, is that one episode automatically gets sent to all of these 8 right up here. And there's people who, for whatever reason, we all have our preferences. Why is it we have so many different automobiles? Or you just name whatever it is. Well, people have choices. And people who are going to do pocket casts for their podcast, they would never know about any of these other ones up here then. So once again, that's what I think is great about automating our system. You can also provide this through web pages. So automatically for me, I pay to have my podcast distributed through Libsyn. Well, I have a page, and you're able to go to that page and click on a episode. You don't have to register, subscribe, do anything. You can do this in an anonymous way. And some people really prefer it that way then. And most all of these podcast channels, well, they all have ways for you to embed into a web page a player. And all people have to do is find the episode and then click on the play button, and they can listen to it right off of the website. You also have all kinds of opportunities for social media. Once again, I'll give you the example of Libsyn. I can automatically have my new podcast episodes, I can have them sent to a Facebook page. I actually set up a separate Facebook page for each one of my podcasts. So it not only goes to my own personal Facebook page, I also have a branded Facebook page just for the podcast, so people can like it and then know whenever a new podcast episode has appeared. YouTube channel, it automatically, using the Libsyn system, automatically sends it to a YouTube channel that I've created for people to be able to listen to it. You can also send a link through Twitter. And then also, I actually even have it sent to my professional LinkedIn account. Now, you can't play the episode in the middle of LinkedIn, but what you can do is click on a web link, and then it'll open up a page and then play the podcast episode then. And then also, there's some sort of system where you can actually send video clips of an audio episode. I've not done this yet, but I just learned about this recently. It's through something that's called headliner.com, and it actually can send that to Instagram. And this is just a sample of the ways that, once again, we can automatically send our episodes. That single one episode can go to multiple places. So once again, I've just been trying to just give you an overview of the point that we can take one episode and actually end up sending that to dozens and dozens of other locations. And the issue is we've got to put our material out in more different places. I think that too many wonderful independent podcasters have a rather narrow niche that they've placed their material. I think that podcasting is one of the most democratizing technologies that I've ever seen in my time as an educator. Anybody can create these things. There's probably some cost involved, but it's pretty modest. Remember my thing about how it is content is king? I think I wasted way too much in the early years trying to come up with what is the perfect microphone, what is the perfect software to edit, and all the rest. And I think those things are important, but when it comes right down to it, is what's the message? Entertainment? Information? Is it a hobby? The way I actually got started in podcasting was some advice, and it said, before you try to create a podcast, listen to some. And listen to some that are of personal interest to you. Well, I remember the very first podcast I ever subscribed to was called Diabetic Feed, and it was a podcast for people who are diabetic. And it provided information which was the cutting edge by these two people, and I faithfully listened to that every episode that they put out. And that really was a model for me. I really liked it a lot. It was personally meaningful to me, and I think that there was lots of other people who were listening to it as well. Well, I'd love to keep up the conversation with you. There's a couple of websites that you might want to take a look at. Here's one, z.umn.edu/podcasting. I have a resource page for everything that I've learned about podcasting and resources from other people on how to be able to develop a podcast, how to be able to organize it. Well, check it out. The other one, in case you're interested in what I do as a podcaster, it's z.umn.edu/mypodcast. And you can actually listen to episodes without even the need to subscribe. You can just listen to them off of a web page. Well, there's 3 of them that I'm responsible for. I remember I was talking to a faculty colleague of mine at the university. I just retired here about 6 months ago or so after 40 wonderful years as a history teacher. And I was asking him something about his sons, like what do they do? What kinds of shows they're watching? I forget exactly what prompted the conversation. And he said something to me, and that was, my one son, rather than watching media, he likes to make media. And I thought, wow, that's really a profound statement. He really finds it creative, interesting. He hopes other people enjoy it, but even if they don't, he enjoys the creation of it. And I think that's kind of what drives me, is I really enjoy making media, and I think podcasting is something that's really special. Well, here's my website. There's a Skype page. We could do a Skype together. There's my email. Let's keep up the conversation, and thanks for your interest in this video, and I hope to put out some more about podcasting. Like I said, I think it's an amazing, simple technology on how we can use the power of the human voice. I'm not saying I'm a great narrator, but I do think there's something authentic about our voices. So, without being trite, I'd love to be able to hear your voice. So let's keep up the conversation. Take care, everybody.